maybe you want to try that mic.
We'll do this the old-fashioned way. Like I said, we're much different than a normal meeting. So, as you will notice, Mayor Bowser is not on the agenda because we want to be flexible to your time. And since you are here now, I think it would be perfectly appropriate to start off with Mayor Bowser. What I would like to say is we're very honored to have you tonight. We're very excited to have you tonight. We know you have very important things to tell us, and we may also have a few questions. So with that, I would like to welcome Mayor Bowser to ANC 180. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. I am very happy to be here to provide you a briefing, and as the commission pleases, answer any questions that you may have. Let me thank you, commissioners, for your generosity in giving me some time on the agenda. I thought I would make some brief remarks and just turn to your questions. Let me also acknowledge that I have been joined by members of my team, and I want all of them to kind of raise their hands. Fantastic. And we have our, is Angie here? Angie Rogers? Okay, I know we were expecting her. And Tanya Royster is here, who is the director of our Department of Behavioral Health. And Greer Gillis is the acting director of the Department of General Services. We also have Craig Stewart from DCRA and Jay Nelder from the Department of Human Services. So I want to, and also Lake Durham Show is here, who is our DDOT director as well, and I want to thank them for all being here. I wanted just to come and give you a few quick updates, and we have certainly appreciated the comments from commissioners and questions and all that we get related to your ANC area in the last 20 months. And we have been diligently following up on the commitments that we've made to the people of the District of Columbia. In these 20 months, we have passed 2 balanced budgets with the Council of the District of Columbia, and the focus of our administration in doing that is the commitment that I've made $100 million every year in affordable housing investments, and that's pretty significant. Whenever I go around neighborhoods across Washington, people talk to me about how pleased they are with progress, and they want to see neighborhoods invested in and revitalized, and your neighborhood is like a classic example of the investments that the city has made to make neighborhoods better, but also with how expensive it has become to live in Washington, D.C. So the $100 million investment is actually enhances and makes predictable our Housing Production Trust Fund. And this, just past week, we actually celebrated getting not only budgeting for those for that amount, but getting that amount of money obligated and out the door for affordable housing projects. So much, in fact, that it is the most that the district has put into affordable housing in the history of the Housing Production Trust Fund. We're very, very proud of those achievements. In the last 2 budget cycles, we have also committed more public education dollars than any time in the history of the district. And that's also good news because a lot of the public education increase that we made is due to the growth of our public schools. And actually, we're in the 6th year of steady enrollment increase in the public schools in the District of Columbia. That's both sectors. That's DC public schools and our public charter schools as well. Actually, the audit for October for this school year was just completed last year, and I think that we're going to see actually more students than we even budgeted for that are coming back to public schools. And I have to tell you that that growth, certainly not by accident, Because of our commitment to education reform, which started robustly in 2007, we have seen this transformation in our schools. We have the opportunity now, after almost 9 years of pretty consistent leadership at DCPS. We are recruiting for a new chancellor. Our deputy mayor for education has just concluded 3 check-in sessions with the community across the city about how we're doing at DCPS, what the community wants from DCPS, and what we expect to see in a new chancellor. So we have some exciting candidates from both inside of the public school system and from outside the public school system. So I'm going to be looking forward over the next several weeks to meeting and interviewing and making some decisions about the next chancellor of the public schools. This year, we also had the opportunity to talk about our school buildings in our budgeting process. Many of you will remember that in 2007, part of our school reform effort was to look squarely at our school buildings and figure out how we're going to change it. When I came into office in 2007, we found that we had a school board that had been sitting on a lot of money for a number of years, yet we had buildings that weren't being modernized. In the time since, we've spent about $4 billion revitalizing our schools. Almost 100 school buildings have been totally transformed. And we as taxpayers should be very proud of the investment that we have made. Now we have about 6 schools that haven't been renovated at all, and about 35 schools that got what we call a phase 1 modernization. So I asked my team, because I was on the council and I got a little tired of the game we played with capital funding. We tell one school you're gonna get fixed this year, and we'll put $10 million in it, knowing that you need an $80 million renovation. So what I charged my team with was right-sizing the school budgets and being honest about what schools needed. So we can't tell you we're going to give you a little bit here, knowing full well next year we're going to have to change it again because it's not enough to do what your school needs. And so in doing that, even when I came into office, we had a summer school blitz planned that was $100 million short. The next year, we had promises that added up to $170 million that we were short. So we scoured our budgets and actually did do some other things that we could have done in transportation or economic development so we could stay focused on schools for this fiscal year. And that's what we did. We added $220 million to the capital improvement plan. I dwell on that issue a little bit because I want the ANCs to be focused on what remains. It's fantastic if you live in a neighborhood or your kid goes to a school that's been totally transformed. But if you're one of the 35 who only got a phase 1 modernization, you want to know when is the rest going to happen. Or if you want it, or one of the 6 schools that haven't had anything, you especially want to know when's your turn. So we submitted I had my team analyze, and we'll be working with the council because we've tried to estimate those remaining projects. And it comes up to about $900 million. And it is a big number, and it sounds like a big number because it is. It's almost $1 billion, but it is also within our reach. So we as a community are going to have to make some decisions about how we get to the remainder of that money so that we can finish our promise to schools. Second area that I wanted to touch on is public safety. We have my MOKER's team, of course. John's here, who is the new Ward 1 MOKER. I hope all of the ANCs have that. When I say MOKER, that's the mayor's liaison in the neighborhood. So for Ward 1, we have 2 MOKERs assigned to your neighborhood. And when you see John, he's me. So make sure that he answers all of your questions, and he certainly works hand in hand with ANC commissioners to do that. So public safety and what we are staying focused on in neighborhoods. So what we've heard in any number of cases, and what I've heard from John from your neighborhood are concerns around some entrenched activity in some cases on different blocks or different parts in the subway station. It's been a particular concern. And certainly we're working with the commander and the lieutenants to make sure areas of consistent and entrenched activity that we are staying on top of. More broadly, I just want to tell you what we've been doing around public safety issues, especially last year when we saw an increase in violent activity. I'm pleased to report that those numbers have dipped significantly in 2016. But we got our full attention last year, and we put additional resources around that activity. We had a whole effort we call it Safer Stronger that moved through the Council of the District of Columbia. So some of those issues were additional penalties and officers. I'm thankful to the council for giving me the authority to hire retired officers that will help us keep our ranks up, and also approve what has been a very successful program for us, a private security camera program where you qualify for a $500 rebate for installing security cameras. And those efforts are moving along very well. So I'll be interested to answer any other questions that you have around that. We've also spent some time with the commissioners and the council member walking neighborhoods to figure out particular issues, whether they're DDOT issues, vacant property issues. We found some issues with the recreation center. We got some questions, and our recreation director has joined us as well. I also was invited to a meeting. Where were we then? We were at Parkview Recreation Center to talk specifically about our New Communities program and what the plan is for the former Bruce Monroe site, and finally the redevelopment of Park Wharton. And so I think that we answered most of the questions there, and I'm happy to address any additional questions that you may have. But we have a really awesome opportunity to deliver on the promise of New Communities. Those of you who are familiar with it, and others maybe not, is to transform several properties owned by the Housing Authority in the District of Columbia into mixed income communities. Now, the government is involved in that and supporting the affordable housing that will be produced at that site. Park Wharton was one of the first 4 selected, and we're pleased to be advancing that project now. Last thing I wanted to mention, commissioners, was DC statehood. And I hope that you've heard a lot about the advisory referendum that will appear on the November 8th ballot. And the process that we're following to get a vote and to finally get it through the Congress. And that is, you may have heard a plan called the Tennessee Plan. What we've been doing in the district for the last 30 years or so is not 30 years, but 20 years for sure, with Eleanor presenting a bill to the Congress and hoping it gets through for statehood. We have kind of put the process back to the people, to the voters first, and to the Congress second, and following the Tennessee Plan. So what it says, the way that Tennessee was admitted to the Union, was that it had a statehood delegation, a shadow delegation like we have. It wrote a constitution for the new state. It defined the boundaries for the new state, and it took a vote to its people to get the people to agree to a representative form of government, the Constitution, and the boundaries. And that entire package was then attached to a petition that was presented to the Congress. And that is the process that we are now following. One thing I knew when I went out to neighborhoods to run for mayor, people ask me all the time, what are we going to do about statehood? As a person who's born and raised here, I had become almost numb to the question about statehood and the same exact thing that we were doing to try to achieve it. So I'm committed to fighting for statehood, but I also wanted to make sure we were doing it in a way that was different than what we've been doing for the past 20 years. And that is embodied in the Tennessee Plan. It was also very important for me in the spring because I thought we could have a historic election. It turns out we're having a very interesting election. I also thought we might have an occasion to have a White House in both houses of Congress that were favorable to our point of view. And I have my fingers crossed for that too. And so what we will be doing in addition to voting for president and for our congresswoman and for our at-large council people, you don't have a council race in Ward 1 this cycle, but we also are going to vote statehood yes. And I ask you to do that. It's very important that we send a strong message to the Congress that that's what the people want. Now this is more than kind of a philosophical thing that we're doing. And certainly, I don't have to make the argument to you that you pay taxes and you shouldn't be treated differently than any other American. But there's some very practical reasons that we need statehood. We already function like a state in many regards. The authority that the mayor of the District of Columbia has is far outsized than any other mayor in America because we function like a state in so many ways. But we don't have those two senators. When it comes down to slicing up the pie, we get left out. So that's why it's just hugely important that we correct that injustice in our system, but also the very practical inequity that we have when resources are sliced up, that we don't have anybody to speak up for us or to vote for us. So that's where we are, commissioners. It's a quick update. A number of my agency officials are here, as I mentioned, and they get to answer all of the tough questions. But we're happy to take any that you have time for.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
What I would like to do is open it up to commissioners first and see if there's any commissioner that has a question. See none on the right. See none on the left. Then we will open it up to people from the community that are here tonight. If you have a question for the mayor, this is a great opportunity to ask her. She's expressed willingness and yes, sir.
Hi, Bill Boyle.
Hi.
Over at Sherman Ave. Mayor, thank you for coming. I wanted to ask you a question. We have a lot of trouble at the school my son goes here. As you know, I think this is a Phase 1 school. We have a really hard time figuring out exactly what money has been budgeted for the school. There, you see on the website, it shows you something. But when you start digging and looking, it's very difficult to figure out exactly what's actually been budgeted. I'm wondering if you would be in favor of a school transparency bill. That when the budget's done, we collect all of the budgeting information for each school, put it on one page, itemized.
Are you talking about the operations? You're not talking about capital, you're talking about operations.
Capital and operations.
Okay.
It's spread out, particularly capital. When you start looking, you find some things are under Rossi, some things are under this. When you get into the core of the budget, it's very difficult often to figure out what is what. And a classic example is we've been promised a new courtyard for 7 years here, and it was not done this summer, even though we were literally given dates for when things were supposed to be done. And then when it didn't happen, it turned out that the money had been promised from 4 different schools. And so they went and did one, and we weren't even told about it until we showed up for this school year, and we still had the same old courtyard that we had had for years that had been promised to be fixed. So the point being, if we could see a real transparent school budget, it would be probably really uncomfortable for a lot of politicians in the city, but it would be really great for the parents who have kids in the schools. Thank you.
Yes, the answer to that is yes, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the confusion was around courtyards, but we do have individual capital budget sections for each school. Now, you're right to say that sometimes there's a HVAC fund, for example, or there could be a green buildings pot, that some things that can change a school happen in those pots. So those are the only things that I can think of as it relates to a capital expenditure that wouldn't be on that sheet. Anything else you can think of, Greer? Okay.
With regards to the capital.
With regards to the capital, go ahead.
And if I could point out, the things that are often exceptions to the regular budget tend to be the things that we really are desperately needing to get done.
Okay, you want to list so the courtyard I've got, and what else?
Half of our HVAC units in each class are not working at any one time in the school.
Okay.
So we have kids in late August up on the 3rd floor here in 95-degree classes,
Okay.
which we all know is absolutely illegal or certainly violates Head Start regulations, I'm assuming. school that's busy moving kids around, trying to keep them in a place that is safe and
I got it.
reliable to teach them, and of course, that then means they spend their time moving kids and shuttling kids, not teaching. And that then has downstream effects on schools.
No, that's
on
not acceptable.
everything else.
So we could get some answers to you around HVAC for sure. I'm not familiar with the courtyard project, so commissioners,
It was us.
it was Aussie. I don't know why they would be involved in a courtyard project.
Good question.
Okay, so let me find some answers to that, but thank you for that question. But more largely, we hear about transparency in school budgeting a lot. Sometimes it's related on the operations side, teachers and programs and things like that. One thing that we have done differently is we have put the school budget out earlier. And one thing that I have done in the budgeting process is also started earlier. We, for example, before I sent the budget to the council, which had been the practice of previous mayors, they would finish the budget, send it to the council, and then come out to the community to ask them about it. Well, really, it's too late then. So my agency directors are right now formulating next year's budget that I'll present to the council in April. And I'm asking the ANC commissioners, they should also opine as a commission on what's important for your ANC area, and also submit that to me as we are formulating the budget that's important. And then I think it's February-ish, or maybe, I forget when, I think it's February, we'll host our budget engagement forums. We'll do 3, and that's another opportunity to weigh in on the next year's budget. But the school budgets for operations, they happen in a separate process. And the capital budget, I may actually think about pulling out a separate capital budget meeting because I think it's really important that you understand what we're dealing with capital, which is increasingly difficult. In the district, you may know that we have a limit to what we can borrow for capital. It is a % of our revenues, and we're up against that limit. The other thing that I'm going to ask the ANC commissioners to look out for is a letter or a presentation request from my public-private partnership office, my P3 office, because they are seeking to develop a list of projects, things that we want done. There's one thing that we announced here on Ward 1 was our streetlight plan. But we're looking, for example, for a private partner to help us replace 70,000 streetlights. And the corrections front, we're going to be looking for a private partner to help build a new corrections facility for us. We'll be looking for a private partner to replace the MPD headquarters, for example. But there may be other neighborhood projects as well. Let me take this moment to also introduce my ride-along mayor. One thing that I do is I invite some of our agency directors to spend a day with me, and Richard Reyes-Gavlin, who is the Public Libraries Director, is riding along with me as well. I mentioned him in this part in particular because the libraries have been pretty innovative about how they can build new spaces.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for about 3 more questions, if that's okay.
I have time, yes,
Okay.
whatever time you have.
So we'll go to Ms. Matthews, and then I see a hand over here. So,
Good evening, Mayor. My name is Carolyn Matthews. I'm a Ward 1 resident, and I'm sure you've had this question before. Is there any way that DCRA could have someone on the weekends? Because we're still having illegal construction on Sundays, and I don't think it's fair that we have to call the police in order to intervene. Because if you call Homeland Security, you're not going to get anyone to come out. It has been a problem in my neighborhood.
Okay.
You know, it's an ongoing problem, and like I said, I don't think we should have to use the police to come to make them stop work. And then the following day, when I call DCRA, illegal construction, they might send someone out, they might not send someone out. I've talked to Director Bowling. She tries to accommodate, but by that time, it's after the fact. So is there any way that DCRA could allot somebody for those days, like the weekend?
Well,
For
it's
certain problems.
certainly something we consider. You're calling on stop work orders?
Well, they're doing construction on Sundays.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got
I'm
it.
talking about Sunday, not Saturday. I know
I got
Monday
it.
through Saturday they can. but they've been doing it quite a bit in my area. And then, like I said, the only place, if you call Homeland Security, there's supposed to be somebody manning that 24 hours, but there's no inspector to come out, no investigator to come out to stop the construction. We're dependent upon the police.
And are the police not
Oh,
responsive?
no, the police is
Okay.
responding. What I'm saying is that they could be better used someplace else. We should not have to rely on the police to address this issue when DCRA should provide personnel or someone to come
Okay.
out to
Well,
do
let
this.
me think about kind of that resource question, because sometimes in enforcement matters, you do need the police.
Yeah.
And that's okay. They know how to deal with it. If it's a non-emergency situation, it's properly routed. If they were needed someplace else, that's where they would be dispatched. So let me look at that issue. Now, I will tell you, I spend a week at DCRA. I see the deputy director is here, and I had DCRA week in August to really look at all of the operations of the department. One of I would say that the complaints that I've gotten around DCRA fall into two big categories, and that's permitting. It's a big issue when people go from the homeowner who wants to do a deck to the downtown person who wants to build a big building. We got a lot of concerns that process wasn't turning around in a predictable way. So that is one area where we're looking for staffing. Another, which sounds like you're referring to, is inspections and making sure that people are actually doing the work that they got a permit to do, and that's something outside of that permit, and getting those inspections turned around as well. And I'll say one more category is vacant property, and how we are addressing the the changing vacant property issues that DCRA, the residents want, and commissioners are calling on DCRA for, what the government can do, and if we need to change the law, quite frankly, to help us deal with some issues. And that's one thing that we're looking at. So this, let me, if I could add real quickly, Commissioner, I authored the vacant property law some years ago that had given us the ability to tax vacant and blighted properties at a higher rate. Before that, all we had was clean it or lean it, and that didn't work at all. And so I got through the council these additional vacant property tax classes. So if your property is vacant and maintained, it's taxed at $5 per $100, and that's much different than 85 cents per $100, which is what the rest of us pay. And if it's blighted, which is, it is vacant and not properly maintained, you pay $10 per $100. Okay, so when you call us, it's a vacant property, OTR and DCRA work together to put that additional tax on it. What the vacant property law doesn't do, and what I think some people expect it to do, is turn a vacant property into an occupied property. The government doesn't take it and sell it, all right? So sometimes people get frustrated with DCRA because they call because it's a nuisance vacant property on their block. And then there could be a nuisance vacant property on their block 6 months later. So that is what we are trying to figure out in the law now. What the government doesn't want to do is be the taker of people's property, who need a chance to get it into order or to sell it. But we also cannot allow, if we have especially a criminal nuisance property that is really a blight and draining the neighborhood, stay in that condition. Right now, our law doesn't allow us to do anything for the worst, what I call the worst of the worst. So we are examining right now ways to change that, to keep working with in identifying the vacant properties with you, making sure that they're maintained, and making sure they're taxed appropriately, but we're also thinking about some legislative changes to help us better deal with the worst of the worst.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, it's not
I'm Sharon Farmer, and I live at corner of 11th and Otis Place Northwest. we've been there since '87, and we've watched the neighborhood go through its changes. Not to mention, we were part of the Orange Hat Patrol that helped make some changes.
Yes, ma'am.
But, I love bicycles, I really do.
Yeah.
And we have a one-way street running from Spring Road up to Monroe. One way. And they've turned it now into a two-way bicycle situation.
On
Because-
Otis? What?
On 11th Street.
On 11, okay.
11th runs one way going south. Now we gotta deal with bicycles coming north. It's a big issue because we've had so many close calls. Because people are getting out their doors and not realizing, here come these bicycles. Some of them have lights, some of them don't.
Mhm,
And we're just like,
mhm.
so, if cars can only travel one way, I think bicycles could only travel one way too. And I would ask the Department of Transportation to look at what they did, because we said, came to the meetings with the DOD guy, or
Mhm.
DOT guy, and said, it's not working. You can't do this to us.
How long has it been like that?
Maybe June,
June,
May,
okay.
how long, Darwin? Huh?
About June or May.
So it's not cool to have two-way traffic when it's supposed to be one-way traffic, that's all I'm saying.
Okay,
And I would like them to look at that.
all right. I think we're gonna put that on the list. Leif, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, I agree with the comment. In an ideal world, we normally set up the bike lanes on opposite sides of the street. That has a huge impact on parking if we don't have adequate lane width. We can take a look at the safety conditions there. But we try to make sure that there's as much accommodation as possible. Take a close look.
Okay, so let me look at that one.
We had people that met, we met with the guy and said what we wanted, we had a group.
Okay,
So how does it get different than we want? 10th Street runs north, takes you all the way across Spring up to Randolph. And you go to Georgia Avenue, go to Kansas, go anywhere. But the idea is you come down that one-way street, the older people, I'm over that. Thank
I
you.
got it. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Leif and I were just at a meeting with the Bicyclist Association. One thing that I told them was we've done fantastic things with cycling, with bike lanes, with bike share. In many cases, we've picked the low-hanging fruit. Like, we've picked the easy ones to install, and they're done. All of the ones that are before us are kind of, they're more difficult. They're in situations like we just described, or they're in situations where parking could be impacted. And so that means that all of us have to work a little bit harder on the front end in planning and coming out to communities to talk, getting feedback, and being responsive to that feedback. So we're committed to looking into that. And let me also say this: we have some traffic. We have some traffic in this city. One byproduct of a city that is growing as fast as ours. Nobody wants to go back to the bad old days when people were moving out of our city. We don't want that. So you don't want to have two. If the traffic's flowing too easy, it's because nobody wants to live or come to your city. All right, so you want some traffic. That's how restaurants survive. That's how retailers survive, and that's how we have vibrant neighborhoods. But we're also growing. In the 25 years, there will be 100,000 more of us. And so we have to use every bit of our transportation capacity. And what generally happens when we add a bike lane, it doesn't mean a car can't travel down that street. It means that's probably one fewer car, at least, on the street. And so that's why, it's part of Leif's charge and all of ours to be creative about how we can get bike lanes and actually get people to stop driving to work, those who can, and use a bike, because we have to use every bit of our capacity to accommodate us who are here right now. And people,
I'm just asking that.
it has to be safe. I'm with you. I'm with you. Right. I think what all bicyclists and drivers want to like is we want some predictability. Like if we're used to going, we got to know how the other is going to behave on the road. I get it.
There's a question here.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Isla Deltich, and first and foremost, thank you so much for being here
My pleasure.
this evening. My question is regarding DCRA and ABRA reform. I represent the residents of a new condo building on 14th and Parkwood. And we are located right next to a restaurant slash kind of nightclub called Juanita's. And for about a year and a half now, since all of us have moved in, we've had a lot of issues with noise. And so we would call, at first we didn't know what to do, so we would call 911 and they said, you need to call ABRA. So they would come and check. Well, the issue with that is by the time anyone can get to us, it's been 4 hours, the place is closed down. So we've been dealing with this issue for a year and a half. There are kids in the building. It's hard to sleep at night. We've tried to get a hold of the owner, but we've had no luck. So as far as ABRA is concerned, finally they actually came inside my condo a few days ago and could hear the noise, but then said, well, it has to be interrupting our conversation. And so to me it was interrupting our conversation, but I don't know how is that measured. Second, as far as DCRA, we noticed that our cars that are parked in the back were covered in grease, as well as our back patios. And we finally realized that actually the grease is spewing out of the vents of Juanita's. So it'll be 2 months, it was 2 months on October 7th that we contacted our councilwoman, DCRA, and apparently DCRA went to check, but when the restaurant was closed, and so they went to the back and said everything's fine, but in order to check for grease, you actually have to go inside the restaurant and check, I guess, the exhaust vents and whatnot. It's a huge safety hazard for us and for the restaurant itself because of, fire hazard, and also grease erodes the roof, so it could erode our roof. So this is something that we've been dealing with for a very, very long time, and I want to commend Mr. Goldschmidt, who's our commissioner, who has been trying to help us with this, but we've really gotten nowhere, and so that is why I'm asking you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did hear about this, but I have to go back to the DCRA. We were doing another walkthrough, and I think I heard about some concerns about Juanita's. So let me see what the results of her inspection were, and we can tell you. Now the noise issue is it's harder, quite frankly, for people who live near in restaurants or commercial and nightlife, because there's restaurants, commercial, and nightlife near where you live, and it's been there. So we have to kind of figure out if there is a violation of the law, how to work with it. In some cases, there are things that we can do from a regulatory perspective. In other cases, it's more effective if there's some kind of community solution. So I don't know if you engage the restaurant when their license comes up. When are they due again? In a year and a half, they should have been up. Does somebody know the answer to that?
It's on our agenda tonight.
Oh, okay. Good. So they're up now for review? Okay, so this would be a great opportunity to work with the commissioner and the business owner to come up with a neighborhood agreement to deal with it, because you're almost assured no satisfaction in calling the government every time you hear music at a nightclub. It's going to be, we're all going to be frustrated by that. So let's figure out if there's some measurable ways that we can work with the business owner to deal with the neighborhood's issues.
Thank you.
You bet. And then we owe you, John, we owe you a report back from DCRA.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's been 45 minutes. I know we got an agenda.
I got it.
But I obviously go quite a number of.
Why don't we do a speed round? Can we do that?
Oh, sure. Okay, well, first you'll have to explain to me what a speed round is.
It means I won't talk as long.
Well, if you'll hold yourself to that,
Okay.
then we'll take, let's do 3 more. We'll start with Commissioner Wade and then 2 from the community.
Okay.
And, okay. Oh,
Good evening, Mayor.
Commissioner.
My city river district, all the east-west streets are one way. Columbia Road, Harvard, Early, and Kennedy. That's my city river district, as well as a couple of other commercial for reserved parking, for moving things. And we now, I mentioned that it's a one-way street, because we don't park on the side of the street. So imagine nowhere to park.
Okay, are they being used, the moving vans? Are people
They
moving?
don't do, 24 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. That's ridiculous. The whole parking spaces that are so valuable, and the vans take 3 parking spaces, not 1, not 2. They have placards for 3 spaces.
Okay, so it's not that people are using them to move, you just think they have too long a period of time?
Too long or
Okay.
too much. I
Okay.
mean, what are the residents supposed to do when there is nowhere to park on 4 blocks across?
Okay,
Nowhere.
okay.
Because half the block is taken up every Saturday, every Friday, and lots of Sundays with these.
So like, do we do that for 24 hours, do you know? No, I'm talking about for moving vehicles. Is it, no?
I don't think that I don't think that the permits are 24 hours.
We have numerous.
Well, let's check, Commissioner.
Also,
See.
not just.
No, people are having it because the alternative is if we don't let people reserve spaces, then they're illegally parked some other way that's probably disrupting traffic. If they're moving, if that's legitimate, now people have to move their stuff. But let's see if we should look at a smaller window.
Yeah, that window.
Okay.
That's, too far.
Got it.
And also, the parking restrictions, the hours of the no parking on either side, on the alternate sides of the street.
Okay.
We can look at those hours and reduce them back to 6:30, that's consistent with the rush hour. Our residents have to wait until 7, and everyone else is parking at 6:30.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Senior Scratch?
I'm sort of piggybacking on the sheriff farmer. I know that all of us, especially old people like me, are adjusting to bicycles, and that's what is reality now. But the scary thing for me is it's always dark when I'm coming home from work, and there's so many bicyclists out there who don't have lights on. I know the police say that they don't have licenses, so it charges them, they generally ticket them. But if they would just stop bicycle riders who don't have lights on, that would give people an incentive to put a light. You get right up on someone and realize they're there. The other night, I live on a one-way street, Columbia Road, and a guy was dressed all in black and speeding the wrong way down Columbia Road with no light on. If I had hit him,
Right.
I mean, in addition to genuinely being upset, I would have been wrong. But somehow, if you guys can just stop people when you see them.
Right. I think what you're speaking to is generally more public education around the rules of the road and how we can both share the road.
Well, there has to be some incentive for,
I got it.
that makes you go get a light.
I got it.
And make them stop at the stop sign.
I'm going to give the privilege of the last question to the gentleman here on the far right, because you had your hand up. Yes, sir, you. Right over by the doors.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are here at Columbia Heights, Columbia Heights Village, and we want to talk about the problem that we had at Columbia Heights on 14th and Columbia Road.
Yep.
It's really a big mess. Club has destroyed everything there. We have high crime there, a lot there. We're doing new instructions there. They're violating the laws, the expenses. They're doing machinery out there with
So you're undergoing a renovation?
yes.
Okay.
We have problems with housing, how they've been putting people out. We would like for y'all to come over here and come and talk with us.
Okay.
And kind of get something together here.
Okay.
Because our place is really a big mess, and it's the heart of Columbia Heights.
Okay. So let me have my team put together a meeting. We'll get the tenant advocate out and someone else that can come and get all the concerns.
Thank you.
You bet. You bet.
Also, they're doing asbestos removal,
Yes, ma'am.
and they're not protecting
All right, will you help me, I'll come up with a date. John is gonna work with you on that date, John.
We need to take some.
Hold on one second, hold on. John is gonna work with you on a date, and then we'll find a place, either in the building or close by, where we can have a meeting with the tenants, okay? All right, thank you, commissioners. And go back.
Probably the rest of this is out of this time.
Community announcements. If anyone has any announcements, you can call or hear us.
No, that's terrible. I have no idea.
Maybe I'll just speak very loudly because I'm sure it's going to work better.
You use that mic, man. That mic sounds a lot better.
Yeah. Well, I'll use this one temporarily, but I'm not going to spend all night here. So, because of the way we're set up, and this is unusual for us, when you make the community announcements, I guess we'll have you come up here in the center since this is the mic and it actually isn't getting the feedback because what you have to say is important and we'd like to hear it. So we'll start with that.
Hi, my name is Jordan Pearlstein. I'm with Georgia Avenue Thrive. I just wanted to remind folks that we're having on October 22nd the Georgia Ave Fall Fest. It'll be at Bruce Monroe Park from 12 to 5 p.m. Again, on October 22nd, that's a Saturday. There'll be music, there'll be dancing, kids activities, local food vendors, other vendors, and service providers. Also a mural activity, so lots of fun things going on. And also just wanted to mention on Sunday, this coming Sunday, we're having a fundraiser that's being sponsored by Bravo Bar, where 10% of the profits from that night are going to be going to help fund the Fall Fest. So if you live in the neighborhood, please come to that on Sunday. Bravo Bar, that's on George Avenue, just south of Columbia Road on the east side of George Avenue. And finally, if you live in the area, I apologize, lots of boring reasons why I don't have our flyers tonight, but we will be doing a burst of 1,000 flyers around the neighborhood this weekend, as well as posters going up. And if you're savvy on the internet, we have a Facebook page, George Avenue Thrive, where you can check out the event there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Brianne Dormush. I'm the Executive Director of the Columbia Heights Initiative. And I just wanted to share with you guys, we're a community development organization. We're the organization responsible for Columbia Heights Day, among many other events. I have these little flyers out and back that have our upcoming events for October. In collaboration with several other organizations, we're helping organize the Trick or Treat down 11th Street this October 31st, Halloween. We also have a community cleanup coming next Saturday and a happy hour next Wednesday at Red Rocks. And so then we also have our big event of the year is Columbia Heights Night, for all of you who love Columbia Heights Day. This is the adult version. This is a fundraiser for us. It's going to be the best party of the year. And so we're really excited to invite all of you in the community. There will be more information about that very soon. But if you just get this is kind of the highlights, save the dates. And we also have this flyer, or this brochure, that is who we are, what we're about, and how you can get involved. We always need volunteers, and we are always very excited to have people come and support our organization and the community through our volunteer events. So any way you want to be connected, you can find us here. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Shrikant Bhatnagar. I'm from Sherman Avenue, Salvation Army. And I want to make a few announcements about right now in Columbia District, DC area, we're taking 6,000 angel tree, 6,000 to children, and the parents not able to afford the Christmas gift for their children. So 6,000 children from Monday to Friday from 9 to 4:30. And it's like you can send the people around your neighborhood. The parent cannot afford the gift. You can send to Salvation Army Sherman Avenue for application. We're going to take the application till October 30th. Or other side, you can adopt the angels. If you have a group, you have business, or you have friends, they can adopt the children who their parents cannot afford to give the gift. So this is one announcement. Second announcement is, as you know, Salvation Army is the place where everybody come together from every background. And on November 24th, we are basically making the Thanksgiving luncheon for around 300 to 400 people. Anybody come and join, because we show the unity. We're living together to make our community a better place. So please come and join on November 24th for lunch also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Horing. I'm with the council member's office. I'm the liaison between the community and her. I have a few quick announcements for you. The first one is her monthly Bring It On Your Walk is coming up next Monday. It's going to be in the morning this time from 8 to 9:30 over at Flying Fish in Mount Pleasant. Also, it's October, which means the launch of the Columbia Heights Mount Pleasant as well as the Georgia Avenue Clean Teams has finally started. So I know that's a big deal for everyone here, and we're really excited about it. Yes, apply for that. The Main Street is also coming soon. Proposals are in for that, and that all sits with DSLBB at the moment as they sort through that. So that's a big accomplishment and a big thing to look forward to in the neighborhood as well. Our office is really excited and proud of that. Let's see. If you haven't already heard, the BCRA committee was split into 4 subcommittees, and Councilmember Nadeau is now the chair of the subcommittee on consumer affairs. So this includes BCRA, OTA, and DISB. That just is through the beginning of the next year and next cycle, but for the next 90 days or so, we're excited to take that on as well. And we're working on a few other items here in Columbia Heights. We know the plaza is a big concern for folks. Councilmember over the summer convened a number of different stakeholders on that front, and that's all still in motion. We've been following up on a more sustainable maintenance plan there. So we have some exciting things coming, and if you have any questions, my contact information is in the back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Stern. I'm the Deputy Director for Planning, Engagement, and Design with the DC Office of Planning. And I'm here tonight to let you know about an exciting initiative that we've launched this year. We are amending the district's comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is the district's 20-year vision for the future planning development of the entire city. It has policies that affect pretty much everything you see, everything you experience, where you live, where you shop, where you work, how you get around. The comprehensive plan has a number of different chapters. There are some that focus on specific topics like housing and transportation, community facilities and services, parks and recreation, etc. And then we also have a whole series of chapters that focus very specifically on the neighborhoods. And one thing to note, if you were to go to our site, we have a project website called plandc.dc.gov. Our plan does not provide geographic guidance, the guidance for the long-term vision for your neighborhoods by wards, which is how we're all familiar with the city. We use this thing called area elements, and so if you look at our plan and look for the mid-city area element, that includes Columbia Heights. I'm also here to let you know that we are about to start a series of 7 community meetings around the city, and the very first one is next Wednesday, October 19th, actually just a few blocks from here at the Columbia Heights Educational Center, Columbia Heights Educational Campus. The meeting starts at 6 p.m. There's a presentation at 6:30, and then we're going to be having an open house where you can talk to us and find out more information about the comprehensive plan. But more specifically, we really want to hear your thoughts and your insights about what you've seen happening in the district over the last number of years, the changes that you've already seen happening, and the future of the city. And so we really encourage you to come out to the meetings. There is a flyer in the back with the meeting details.
along with a brochure with more information about our comprehensive plan process. And we really hope to see you and to hear your voices in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any comments from commissioners?
Sure, there will be a meeting of a version of the Public Safety Committee at Kenyon Square on the 25th at 7 o'clock. Anybody interested in dealing with public safety issues, particularly the increase in homeless folks that are being very aggressive and that kind of stuff? We're looking for any ideas.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to committee reports. Commissioner Frost, did you have the zoning and planning committee report?
It's at Kenyon Square, right?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Commissioner Frost and Chairman of Planning and Zoning. I wanted to add to Tanya Stern's presentation. There will be added a resilience element to the comprehensive plan. So that will be the new section that the comprehensive plan will be covering. Just to give you a little background, this amendment cycle will include the creation of new comprehensive plan policies and actions to advance the concept of resilience policy. Also, will be integrated into existing citywide and area elements. To prepare for the Office of Planning to prepare this draft, the resilience consultant team will conduct a literature review to identify the latest innovative thinking, best practices, and new guidelines on the application of the resilience on a neighborhood and a citywide level. If y'all want to learn more about the resilience concept of the comprehensive plan, you could definitely contact Ms. Tanya Stern, Deputy Director of Planning and Engagement and Design, at 202-442-7635. Anybody need those contact information, please email me at 1807@anc.dc.gov. Also, I wanted to cover that the meeting location would be at the Columbia Heights Education Campus at 3101 16th Street Northwest. The nearest metro stop would be Columbia Heights, which is the yellow and green line. And it would take place October 19th, Wednesday, and it starts at 6 and at 8 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to presentations. We have one from DDOT's traffic study and proposal for the intersection of 14th and Elm Street, which I know this intersection doesn't function.
I wondered if I can do this without the microphone. Can people hear me? Yes. Awesome. Helps to be loud. Hi, I'm Emily Delphi. I'm with DDOT Traffic Operations and Safety, specifically with the safety team. So I deal with sort of day-to-day operational and safety issues all around. For reference, I used to actually live in Columbia Heights on 14th Street, so I'm really familiar with 14th and Monroe and how it operates. I have some handouts, but not enough for everybody, so I'm going to put them in the back at the end. If anybody doesn't get one, Commissioner Miller does have this as a PDF file, so we can distribute it to anybody who has any questions. I'm going to use my hands, so I'm going to put this down. So real quick, essentially what happens at 14th and Monroe is that it's backwards. 14th and Monroe, as you know, I have to remember I'm doing it backwards. The offset is different. So normally when you have an offset intersection, if it looks like this, if your approach is, when you make a left turn, both people can go. 14th and Monroe is the other way. So when we have left turns coming, they're hitting, they're conflicting with each other. Because of also the way that the Monroe Street comes in from 16th to 14th, there's also, it's hard to see the vehicles coming, and they're further obstructed by the really big dance place building. So DDOT has been working back and forth with the community to try to mitigate how this works. We started with some signing and striping, trying to put in what we call like the puppy tracks to try to get people to get through the intersection without having those near miss issues. and it's just not working. So this has been an ongoing issue with the community. What we did last year, and there's been a little bit with some transition in the summer, but now we do have our study completed, and we looked at sort of what can we do to make this better. And there's two main options. The first option is something that we can do in the shorter term, and that is what we call a split phase. And what that does is you would get green on one side and then green on the other side. And they would operate separate so that you'd be able to have a left turn go and the PED, and then a left turn and a PED at the same time. The other option is to make Monroe continuously one way, either between 13th and 14th, or between 14th all the way, or just a whole meter all the way to 13th Street. This is something that is much longer term. We can't really do it quickly because we need to make sure that the residents are on board. The thing we also see here is if we make it so that it's one way east, which would make sense because Monroe's east, you end up seeing some connectivity issues in the neighborhood. Where are those west vehicles going towards 16th Street? Where are they going to go? And what we're concerned about is that they're going to go up into the neighborhood and come out at Newton, and there's not a signal there. So how are they going to turn left, get to 14th Street? There's unsignalized pedestrian crossings, there's bus stops. I used to live right there. There's also bars. It's just a little more complicated. So what we're proposing as DDOT is to do the split phase. This has been a concern with the community in the past of what if it doesn't work. What we're hoping is we have to go through the NOI process. That takes 30 days. And that is our official notice to the community that this is what we're going to do. Either way, we have to do that because we're changing the way the intersection works. After that's done, then we have to actually implement it. The split phase, all we have to do is go in and put in a new signal that shows a green arrow and then change the signal timing. That takes about 60 days. So we'd be able to get this done in about 3, maybe 4 months at the worst, depending on if we get comments from the community. What we would then want to do is spend about 6 to 9 months evaluating how it works. If it doesn't work, we can take it out and we can do something different. If it does work, awesome, people are happy. But essentially, this is our opportunity to try, see if it's working, see if it helps, and if it's not, we'll come back, we'll look at it again. If we need to go the one-way route, we'll go that way. If we need to do other changes, we'll investigate that as well. So essentially what we're trying to do is get something in, try to get this resolved as quickly as possible, knowing that it may not work, and we may need to do more, and that's something that DDOT's trying to do better with. So I'll take a few quick questions, and then my boss's email is on the flyer, so if anybody has more questions, they'll come to me as well.
I was saying, Arrow, 14th Street, when you get like to Harvard, can you make a turn on Harvard and Columbia to ease some of the traffic from there as you're going up towards Monroe Street? Because that's almost like a bottleneck, especially right there at Harvard.
So that is something, Kate is actually going to be talking after me about the Crosstown study, and that looked at sort of a greater transportation picture in the neighborhood, and she'll be able to answer some of those questions. But yes, those are simple answers. Yes, those are things that we can look at. But right now we're just focusing at 14th and Monroe.
Will the split timing alleviate the right turn coming out of Monroe, turning right onto 14th? Because in the morning, traffic is still backed up.
Yep, so for southbound, right? For the right coming from 16th to come south?
Yeah, coming out
Yeah.
of Monroe, making the right onto
So,
going south.
sort of. What will happen, with the advantage to the split timing is, so if you look at the intersection to the south at Park and Kenyon, that intersection gets less green time for 14th Street because it has to give a separate phase to Kenyon and a separate phase to Park. So what's happening is you're coming down 14th Street or you're coming down Monroe, and there's a green light for 14th, but you can't go anywhere because everybody's waiting for the light at Park. So by introducing the split timing, we give slightly less time to 14th Street, but this will allow us to better coordinate those two signals to try to get more queuing space, so more ability for the vehicles to clear out and more people to be able to turn both right and left to get south on 14th Street. That is something that we may have to iterate a few times with the timing to get the cycle just right, but that will hopefully be an improvement that we'll be able to do with this plan. in part of this, also there are some signing and marking improvements. That does include the do not block the box, sorry about that. And some other sort of little tweaks to the signing and the marking that will include in the really short-term type things that we can do.
I noticed that in some places, since Rocky Park has changed, you can't go downtown, they actually have real people out there helping with the traffic. 14th Street and Sherman Avenue was so bad with the blockage and the locks. It'd be really cool to put people over there too on 14th and Sherman Avenue.
I can take that comment back, and we do, so that is our traffic control officers. And unfortunately, that comment didn't come up with the mayor, but the council did give DDOT a significant increase in budget for TCOs. So we should hopefully have more of them and to be able to deploy them in that type of thing. So you said Sherman and
14th Street is a nightmare.
which Sherman and 14th at which places?
Oh my God.
Or just everywhere?
Everywhere right
Okay,
now.
understandable.
Because everybody's traffic from the park is being sent our way now. So it's more congested. You figure from 8 o'clock to 9:30, if you don't leave home before 7 o'clock, you're not getting to the food.
So I'll talk to both our manager who deploys the TCOs, and we also have a whole separate team working on the Rock Creek Church and Beach Drive stuff, and I'll talk to them as well. Any other questions about 14th and Monroe specifically?
Well, I was just wondering if that plan of the arrows don't work, what then? Because I know we've already spent 10 years ago, millions of dollars to create that mess against the desire of this ANC commission. We were overrode by Director Monomer.
Okay.
And they created the bump outs that mess up there in Monroe, that right turn only mess off of Park Road, and have to go left at Otis or Street North in order to get to 16th Street. That was a deliberate, created mess that we fought against.
Okay. If
So
the arrows...
my concern as a taxpayer and as a citizen who lives in this area, who was so disrupted, the cost of straightening that out if the arrow thing doesn't work. Because you said if that doesn't work, you're going to have to go to another plan. The only plan is to tear that mess out because it impedes the fire trucks. When they did that, we told them it was going to impede the access of fire trucks. Do you know how difficult it is for those trucks to go down 14th Street between the fire station and Kenyon or even Irving? It takes them 10 minutes because there's nowhere for the cars to pull over. On either side.
So the option, essentially, if it doesn't work, is the one-way. There may be a few other things that we can try, but what we're hoping to do is do the split phase with the separate green time, give it about 6 months, and then come back, see if it's helping. It may not obviously fix the capacity issues. There's still going to be congestion in Columbia Heights. Everybody wants to be there. It's great. Love it. But if that doesn't work, we'll reevaluate if we need to. Then we'll start to work with the community to see, do we do this one way? Does it only go to Holmead or does it go to 13th Street? And kind of how can we mitigate that as well? So that's the other option. And that's just because it's a longer term and we want to try the short term signal issue first.
Okay. I'll say, are there any other questions just about 14?
As I turn around.
So I just had one, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's
So
fine.
I just had one question, and I feel you've covered everything, and we've had this discussion before, but after speaking to members in our senior community, and they're very excited that there is going to be a designated time for them to cross, I want to make sure that when that time is set up, that we don't end up with a situation like we had on the south side initially, where 16 seconds, 14 seconds isn't enough for our senior committee, or community, and those who have problems crossing the street. So I want to make sure that we're getting enough time.
I can make sure that the signal timing plan does include enough time for either seniors or any sort of mobility challenge or people with children can get across. And that's making sure that the flashing don't walk sign is long enough.
I mean, I would say at least 20 seconds. I know initially at 14, 16 seconds it was very challenging, and I believe that's even a slightly shorter stretch on the south side than it is on the north side.
Yeah, well, we can take a look at the timing as well and north and south separate, but both of them will be given a good amount of time. Right? Any other questions about 14th and Monroe specifically?
Thank you again very much for coming, Emily. I just had a simple question. You had said that in that 6 to 9 month period, you would be responsive to people, taking into account people's reactions. You will also be, DDOT will be observing as well, right?
Yep. I actually come through Columbia Heights pretty often, so I'll be looking at it myself. If it's not me, we'll obviously take comments from the community, we'll get feedback. People will be commenting on Twitter, obviously, if it doesn't work. So we'll hear those, and then we'll also, in 6 or 9 months, want to come back to the ANC, find out from you guys if it's working, and if necessary, we'll get our consultants back out there and do another traffic study, and do some additional observations with those resources as well, and hopefully get some resolution. We're not just going to ignore it and hope it works.
Okay, but there won't be any kind of specific study. I mean, in other words, somebody from DDOT will go out one day, for example, just to monitor and see exactly what's going on.
I probably will, yeah, a few times. With the added benefit of going to the community, going to like farmer's market. So. There's one other, I don't want to take up too much time because we're running pretty late. Real quick.
Yes, I just want to know, how do I get TCOs in other intersections in the city? Because I've been calling for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I've called 311 and I've requested certain areas that need them desperately.
Specifically, 311 is the best. Right now, what we're seeing is the budget just passed with the increase for TCOs. The issue is that the demand severely outstrips our supply for TCOs. So if there are specific locations, probably the best thing to do is talk with your commissioners and have them email us at DDOT, and I can give them the contact information for the head of our TCOs, and they work with deployment. And sometimes it may not be someone there every day. We do have some roving teams that go around, but we're having to respond to things all over the city. But I'd like to be able to a lot more necessary. So I'm going to concede the floor, and I think Kate is up next to talk about the crosstown.
Now ready for Kate to follow up DDOT with the crosstown study. If you could give us a quick.
I'd love to.
I'm going to put the rest of these.
Thanks for having me, everyone. I don't know, hopefully you guys were able to come out for the DC Crosstown study. Raise your hand if you're able to come. Okay, hopefully you've heard of it. Who's heard of it? Okay. I'll give a brief overview. There are handouts at the front, and hopefully you grabbed one. The DC Crosstown study came out of the Move DC, the citywide Move DC transportation study. It was within the 2-year action plan to study the optimized connections, transportation connections between Columbia Heights and Brooklyn. And we are just finishing up the 12-month study this month, tomorrow in fact. And we went out for our final public meeting with our recommendations for bettering the east-west connections September 13th. That was our last meeting. We have had 4 public meetings, trying to get community input on what projects were and designs should be moved forward in the future. The projects, there are 14 projects that came out of this study, and they are short and long-term projects, focusing on multimodal improvements, bike improvements, and transit improvements throughout the corridor. In Columbia Heights, I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. So in Columbia Heights, it's 2 transit priority corridors. The eastbound would go on Irving Street from about 16th Street to the Washington Hospital Center. And the westbound transit priority would go along Columbia Road from the Washington Hospital Center again to 16th Street. What transit priority means in this case would be that one travel lane during certain times of day, peak hours of travel during the day, so the morning rush hour, the evening rush hour, would be dedicated to a bus-only lane. What's important to know about all of these studies is that they're just project recommendations, so they require additional processing to get through either a study period, an environmental process, a right-of-way acquisition look at, and then finally to engineering, design, and construction. So this is really the front end of every single one of these 14 projects that we're going through. So the transit priority project that I just mentioned in Columbia Heights, it's not going to be done tomorrow. Another project manager, not me, I'm a long-term planner, will come out to you all from the Transit Bureau, more than likely, and discuss those options with you in the future. Another project proposed in Columbia Heights is on Kenyon Street. It's a dedicated bike lane, east and westbound, along either the north side of Kenyon Street or the south side of Kenyon Street. This would require some trade-offs. All these projects require one mode or the other to be affected in some manner. And in this case, that one area of parking would be removed, and that's in a permanent basis. So that was proposed as part of the project all along. We vetted it through the community, and hopefully we can move forward with that.
Oh, no.
That will not be, this will not be the last time that you hear about that proposal. When it gets funded, if it gets funded in the future, they will come back out to you. They will thoroughly vet that with you all. But I did want to mention that there are trade-offs. That's one of the major trade-offs with allowing everyone in the community a safe and predictable location to travel. What we don't want is things that people mentioned, bicycles going wherever they wanted to, unpredictably getting struck by cars, affecting both the car, automobile use and the bicycle.
Girlfriend, you cannot put traffic two ways down a one-way street. You're gonna make Kenyon two ways, you're gonna take a whole layer of cars away.
We're gonna take it's a parking trade-off, so parking would have to be removed. So that is,
You don't even travel that street. I'm just here complaining to the mayor that we only have parking on one side of the street from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And it's difficult for residents. And now you're talking about taking a whole lane of parking forever. I fought 8 years to get that parking. And now you're gonna talk about, no, I'm very upset, kids, I'm sorry, I couldn't wait. This is so out of the box wrong, and then you said you're gonna get funding and then come back and talk to us, don't waste the money. I will start a one-person campaign, that's the worst idea I've ever heard of taking away a densely populated neighborhood where we have nowhere to park now, from the hospital center to 16th Street, no place. Did you all hear that? Yes. These are the same people who did Morton Street at Monroe Street at 14th Street, ruined that neighborhood, put those bowls up there, widened the streets, the sidewalks, and narrowed the streets when they put that huge shopping mall up there, made it nowhere to go but a jam. Now they're talking about taking away your parking. You're talking about hundreds of cars, not a dozen. You're talking about hundreds of cars, miss. I'm sorry.
I hear you, and I will tell you. So I will tell you, this is not the end of the process. This is not a done deal that the parking will be permanently removed. It's not a done deal that the design will be as it is
But we don't have
proposed.
done deals. We're asking you not to make that recommendation as a part of your deal. Because it's not gonna pass muster in this neighborhood.
Understood. I understand your concerns, and this is the beginning of a discussion. I'm just telling you what the highlights are from the study that started 12 months ago. So the idea of the study was to separate bicycles from transit in a north-south direction. So we concentrated bicycles on the north side of the project. So Kenyon Street was a targeted area, as was Irving Street. It was meant to make a more predictable location for vehicles and bicycles to travel, as well as transit, and to optimize how people get through the corridor in the east-west function. Another major, I understand.
We have a presentation. Let's hear what she has to say, and that will inform us of what future actions we may or may not want to take.
Okay. Another major highlight from the study is the location, the streets just west of the Washington Hospital Center. Today, they're sort of a confusing intersections. that are there with diagonal crossings and unpredictable movements between vehicles and pedestrians. What we want to do are 2 short and long-term projects. The short-term project would do things like put a sidewalk along Washington Hospital Center, where sort of a dirt path leads now, and there's no real location for a person to walk. We would propose putting a sidewalk there. We would also improve the crossing between Michigan Avenue and down towards the Washington Hospital Center, where I just mentioned, sort of a ramp highway style. We would put a functional marked crossing with ADA compliant features there, meaning that there would be new mobility challenged ramps and likely better street lighting, a better wall, not a highway style extenuator there, which is that metal ramp. So those types of things, and then fixing the intersection with Park Place and Michigan. There are redundant 2 right turn movements for vehicles and multiple crossings. We would like to narrow that up, make it less free-flowing movement so that cars feel like they have a right to go right. That is another highlight. The long-term solutions in those areas, in that same grid that I was mentioning, are just directly west of the hospital center, where the diagonal crossings at Park Place, Columbia Road, and I think it's Irving Street, would be eliminated. That's a long-term project to require right-of-way, a significant right-of-way analysis, so who owns those pieces of the property, and then removal of those roads, and then seeing how the roads would function without those diagonal crossings. Today, it creates unsafe crossing movements for pedestrians, and we really just want to make everyone have a predictable, safe place to cross there. The other major highlight change from the existing condition is over at North Capitol Street and Irving Street. That's where the big cloverleaf interchange is, and it feels like a highway in the middle of the city. There's 2 short-term improvements, or there's 2 improvements, 1 short-term, 1 long-term proposed there. The short-term improvement would redesign the ramp ends where it meets Irving Street, so that people feel like they could actually cross without having a car just coming on unpredictably and not having a real stop control there. So people right now can drive in their cars as fast as they want, they likely feel, because they feel like they're entering a highway. What this short-term study would look at is that interaction, and perhaps put a stop sign there so that the people coming off of North Capitol have to stop and look both ways to see if the pedestrian is crossing in front of them. The long-term solution is removing legs of those interchange that don't really need to be there today, and creating a new interchange interaction between the Columbia Heights, the North Capitol Street and Irving Street. Perhaps putting a full stop signal at North Capitol Street and 1 at Irving Street, and reducing the number of lane off and on ramps between the 2 roads. This is a long-term study, so without showing you a diagram of how that could happen, that needs to be studied more in terms of a concept, and it's a long-term study because we have to do a technical analysis of how traffic functions, and then go through the FHWA, and then go through planning and design, and then engineering, and then construction. It's a very involved process. This is like a very long-term project in that it's probably 6 years away and requires millions of dollars to be studied and then constructed. So those are the major highlights of the study. And again, I want to emphasize that this is not the end of any of these projects. This is just ideas for where safe areas for people to travel with all modes, vehicles, bikes, and transit opportunities exist. Another just one more short-term project is at 14th and Irving Street, so right down the road here. There's a project that will be going underway that's similar in that it's a signal timing exercise to better time crossings between vehicles and pedestrians. It's what we call a barn stance. And that we're studying the number of seconds that it takes for people and cars to get through the intersection in a better way, so that there are fewer conflicts between people in their cars and people walking across the street at that intersection. So that's underway now, and that was a initiative of our plan.
You're studying that now?
They've started trying to procure a contractor to look at it.
But no one's measuring anything at that intersection?
No one's done anything, it's just started.
Okay. It would make sense probably to wait until that metro station entrance reopens, because there's an unusual amount of pedestrian traffic there.
They will consider that as part of the.
We also have some historic counts, like before the metro station, portal closed.
Okay.
So we can look at those.
Right.
Well, I'll get to you. Commissioner Brown expressed a question a minute ago. Commissioner Wade.
Okay, of course.
Thank you for coming out today. Thank you for organizing the community forums on composting. I have a question about the dedicated bus lanes that are proposed for Columbia Road and Irving. Can you talk specifically about how you handle parking on that area during hours, especially during street cleaning?
Okay, so right now, the idea is, and again, this will be subject to further study, is that one lane of travel would be closed during the AM and peak hour period. So that means rush hour traffic times. 7 a.m. to about 9 a.m., you would not be able to physically park in that area. And there would be signage saying, remove your car by X time to Y time, you cannot park here. And then that would be repeated in the afternoon, so that the transit boat, so the buses could go in a more predictable way through that area in a dedicated space, not stopping for cars pulling in and out, that kind of thing. And so that buses become more reliable. Can I take that?
You know that's already the situation going those across East-West Street.
They would do a study to see what the
But
optimal
that's
hours
already
are.
the situation. You can't park on those sides of the streets between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.
So it would be not as, you're right, it wouldn't be much different than it's today.
Except when you said that you have a parking lane. But
That's not on that, that's not
that's
that
not
case,
my
yeah.
question. Could you answer?
The street, during street cleaning,
Street,
how that slowing costs and streets.
so they would need to study that, and then optimize this, or change the signage to accommodate people in those instances. It's a,
My question had to do with the up by the Washington Hospital Center.
Yes.
The changes you were talking about making there. Does that mean that
Interchange?
does that mean that the project for the development of the Solius home and all of that construction they want to be doing is off the table now? So why would we spend money reconfiguring traffic and intersections when they're getting ready to do what they did up on 14th Street, which is build, develop a huge amount of traffic into that area. It's very, I'm not gonna say short-sighted, non-big picturist.
so we've been coordinating, it's a good question, we've been coordinating closely with our Forces Retirement Home Redevelopment, studying this interchange and coordinating on the design options. As I mentioned, this is the solution that's presented here is not the ultimate solution. It'll be some variation of the solution. In fact, this was the solution that the community, that came to the community meetings and participated online, they liked this the best, this solution that you'll see here, removing the lanes, and they're supportive of that.
Are there any other questions from commissioners? I'll take. Yes, sir.
So, Mike Robbins, I just had a question about, you had two concepts for the transit lanes, basically for the buses and for the bicycles. So you just said that you got feedback at the committee and you got feedback online. At least on the online vote, it was 2-1 for the proposal you didn't pick in this area that, would put the bike lanes on both Kenyon and Irving. that at least in that proposal, it was a vast majority of people wanted the other one you didn't choose. And so it seems like that wouldn't necessarily lose the parking on Kenyon by having, 2 lanes of bikes on Kenyon. You could put one of them on Irving, so it goes with traffic. As this young lady pointed out, that's dangerous for drivers, it's dangerous for other people, it's difficult for bikers who aren't necessarily, going against traffic. So you have an option there that the community wanted, that it seems like is a viable option for bicycles, and you didn't pick it. Is there a reason for that?
So we took a number of factors into consideration when we made this recommendation. The community input was a big factor. It was also our internal analysis, and that included technical transportation analysis that looked at how traffic flows, like vehicles flow through this area with certain designs. Sure. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I didn't want to scream into the microphone, so I have a phone live talking. So what we did is we did a technical analysis that included a traffic model, basically, and took into consideration what the community requested, as well as the options that were on the table. And when we looked at the holistic picture, so it was transit, bicycles, vehicle travel, and pedestrian safety, a number of factors, as you probably saw online with each of the meetings, this recommendation made the best benefits to the whole study area. So there's always a trade-off. We would have lost parking on one, we would have had to shift the transit lanes if we did do the couplet as you suggested, one on Irving and one on Kenyon. So we had some hard decisions to make, and this was based on our analysis, our technical analysis, and the community factors. This was the recommended project list that came out.
But with all due respect, you projected the community input. No one at this meeting seems to be particularly content with losing a parking lane that, this has been voted down by 2 to 1 by the community who voted online. This isn't what the community wants.
So we had to take in your consideration and technical analysis as well as our interagency. So our stakeholders such as WMATA, what they want, there was a holistic picture considered. And I will tell you that again, the projects here, it's not the end of the road for these projects. They'll continue to live on and obtain additional community input from you all moving forward.
Thank you. With that, the last thing I would want, especially since there was concern about parking in the one-way, is if you could provide contact information so people with concerns can continue to have this dialogue with you.
Okay, sure. So can I give it to you? You have my contact information, but my email address is Catherine with a K, KATHERINE youngbluth@dc.gov. And if you want more information about the Crosstown study, there's a website. It's dccrosstownstudy.com. And all the information from the public meetings and results are all on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the administrative matters. Commissioner Brown, can you take the roll call?
Marvin Johnson. Absent. Josue Sama.
Present.
Tom Morris. Absent. Matthew Goldschmidt.
Here.
Christine Miller.
Here.
Richard Lesher.
Here.
Darwin Frost.
Here.
Kenneth Bates.
Present.
Bobby Holmes. Absent.
consent agenda, there is a letter of support for proposed bus relocation. That is the only remaining thing in the consent agenda right now. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved. Next item on official business is the settlement agreement for Heat the Spot, which is Commissioner Brown. Do you want to walk us through that?
Certainly, you also have a representative from the spot. You can come forward and talk a little bit about the application for the restaurant's Class E license. And you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Good evening, Commissioner A1, Commissioners of A1 and Community. My name is Dubois Cox. I'm Chairman of Federal Capital Solutions. We're financial advisors to business and government. The reason I'm here today is because, unfortunately, one of my clients, or the client, I should say, is Timnette Gordon. I think most of the commissioners have been to the spot. I recognize several faces. Unfortunately, she's a new mom, and she had to hurry home to the 3-month-old, I think it was. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you a presentation. Heat the Spot is located at the corner of Georgia Avenue and Kiefer. It's 3200 block, and they've been in business for a little more than a year. I think it was their anniversary, their 1-year anniversary was June, so that makes them about a year and 3 months. They are now basically a fast serve deli type restaurant. It is a sit down restaurant. Let me make that perfectly clear. However, most people are usually getting their items to go, and they serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The reason why we're here today is to offer our appeal to both the community and to the commissioners for your support and your acknowledgement of the application for CR Abra license. CR meaning sit-down restaurant. And the only change that you would see that's different from what you would see today is the outdoor patio. The outdoor patio is not on public space, that is private space. However, Abra, even though the city does not require any special licensing procedure, the Abra will, and that would require or at least we've requested a seating capacity of 20 people outside. The hours of the operation would not significantly change. The food service would of course increase. In fact, I was at the restaurant today, and one of the patrons came in the restaurant and said it was only 3 or 4 people there, said to the people that were there, "I would not eat here, guys, if I were you." And everybody just sort of stopped and looked at this person and said, "What are you saying?" He said, "Well, the reason why I wouldn't want to eat here is because you'll never eat anywhere else." And I thought that was hilarious. And I think that's pretty much what I want to stop with. The restaurant is very popular in the neighborhood. Most of the commissioners on board here have been there. As far as I am aware of, there are no complaints from any agency in the District of Columbia concerning this. That means health, public safety, DCRA, public space, ABRA. The contesting period ends in the first week of November. So again, unless there's any questions that we can't seem to answer for you tonight, we are asking for your endorsement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown.
So Heat the Spot is located on Georgia Avenue, corner of Kiefer and Georgia, and I'm supportive of this establishment's application, and moving forward when I move to support the sale of the brand Lincoln's Black Class A liquor license.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Next is a resolution in support of Bill 0742, the Charitable Solicitations Relief Act of 2016. Commissioner Miller, this is a resolution you've introduced, even though I was happy to co-sponsor. Could you walk us through it?
I can, and I just saw the error, so I apologize. It is the Charitable Solicitations Relief Amendment Act, and while this gives, it switches the authority to the mayor to prescribe terms and conditions for charitable solicitation regulations, most important, I think, to our community and to many of our local and small nonprofits is the increase in the maximum exemption amount from $1,500 to $25,000. Currently, we small and local nonprofits are being asked to pay an exorbitant fee, which is disproportionate to neighboring jurisdictions and far higher than anywhere else in the country. Many of these nonprofits represent neighborhood-based civic associations. They represent parent-teacher organizations and groups that are formed to support the needs of our neighbors and our communities. They also rely very largely on volunteers. So in addition to the high fees and the fiscal burden, the process also requires a biannual review process. And again, to point out that many of these organizations rely on volunteers. And so to then turn around and ask every 2 years for volunteers to commit additional time to file and go through the process again is also excessively burdensome. I would say that the estimated $250,000 in lost licensing fees to DCRA is negligible when you consider that this is a small amount in relation to the important work that these nonprofits and their volunteers do across our city to serve and strengthen our communities. Just as another addition, they're often providing supplemental services to our children, to our schools. They help with our parks. They help with those who are disadvantaged and those with the greatest need. So I would, say that supporting this resolution would be a benefit not just to the nonprofits, but also our citizens in our community.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. I would just like to add that, well, I've been on this commission, we have had examples where small nonprofits have come to us and asked for a grant where, due to the timing of the grant they were requesting and the fiscal year, they were concerned that if they were successful in advocating for something that would help the community, they questioned whether they should because they were concerned about this cap. So I think that this is a very real situation that impacts our community and communities across the city. So I commend you for taking the initiative to write this resolution, and I heartily support your work. That said, are there other comments from commissioners? All right, are there comments from members of the community? Then is there a motion?
I move that we accept as presented.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you so much. Next item on the agenda is renewal of Juanita's Restaurants agri-license. Commissioner Goldschmidt, this is in your wheelhouse.
So Juanita's is on the northeast corner of 14th and Parkwood. And it's been a restaurant of concern for some time. Lena Aqualine, who sort of succeeded me, I think worked out a settlement agreement with them some time ago. I think it was very difficult. And then I think last time their settlement agreement was up, a seat. But the neighbors have had problems for years. I've gotten complaints, and I've attempted to work it out with the owner of Juanita's, but I can't get in touch with the owner despite him being there nearly every night. I go in, I leave my card, I explain the situation, and I hear nothing. So my plan now is to oppose or to file a protest against their renewal, and there'll be some mediation with Abra, and hopefully we can work out an agreement whereby they mitigate some of the problems that they're causing. Primarily, after hours service, I think, is the most egregious issue. They also have DCRA issues where they're spraying grease in their back. They have noise issues, and they're serving drunken patrons all night, which causes issues bleeding out into the street. Two neighbors have stayed this whole time to watch and to participate. So maybe if you guys have anything to say, anything to add?
Yes, I've lived in the neighborhood for 16 years, and we practically begged them for at least two to do something about the volume of their music. We live they're on 14th, I'm on Parkwood, in back of them. They just never seem to do anything. My neighbor who had two small children, we actually went over there ourselves with those two small children, and again, practically begged them to please turn the music down. It didn't seem to do anything. I think at some point they got tired of us, and they put up some sort of soundproofing on the back of their building. So we're not bothered now by the sound, but we have been bothered by it. We were bothered by it for years until they finally did that. But we also get those drunken people who leave their place and come onto Parkwood where their cars are parked. So they seem to me that they've been inebriated for quite some time. So I would also assume that they've been drinking after they've been way, way, way inebriated.
And I guess if I could just add, we really have tried working with them because they're our neighbors, and we don't want to call the cops, and I mean, we really wanted to have communication. So I would go in there, but then the owner was never there. I could never get a hold of anybody, and basically what ended up happening is the men that were at the bar would ask me if I had a boyfriend or a husband, and that was kind of the common, theme of this. There are children that live above Juanita's. There's, kids in our building. It is, and I understand, it's a club at night, I guess, but the noise is so loud, and I'm talking even like 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning. And what they do is they also throw out their beer bottles in the dumpster at like 3 a.m. And it's so loud that it wakes us up every night. It wakes up the pets, it wakes up the kids, and this has been going on for years. I mean, it's not that we haven't tried, and also their patrons always end up throwing trash in our yard. So every day we have to pick up the trash. I don't know if they're allowed to have a trash can in front or not, but some of these things, they just get really old, and then the trash attracts rats, and we have rats in the yard, and it's just been an ongoing issue for a really, really long time that we want to get to the bottom of.
So just to sort of wrap this up, Abra's certainly going to renew their license, but what we just need is a forum where they're forced to sit down and speak with us, and we can work some of these issues out. And I think that filing a letter of protest is the way to do it.
I think we could have been a bit more proactive about this and perhaps met with them. I don't know where the breakdown in communication are. Are they here today?
I'm not sure that you heard what I said. I've been attempting to meet with them for months.
Yeah, I know. I heard you. I've also heard your comment about those drunken patrons.
Yeah.
And those drunken patrons, I've heard it too much in the community to make those Latinos or a few other things. And so I'm worried that there's a breakdown in communication.
Well, let me say that I'm not sure that there's any restaurant on 14th Street in my SMB that's not owned by Latinos. So any issue is probably going to be a Latino issue. And I'm not sure how that's relevant.
Can just because I live there, I understand your concern. Look, I am a white woman. I was born in Bosnia. I'm Muslim. I know that you can't probably tell by looking at me, but it is what it is, right? It's not, I don't think anyone is saying those Latinos. It is the people that go to Juanita's. I don't know who goes, but I know the men that come out and women. A lot of times they are overly intoxicated. Now the issue with that is, if I'm there with my dog, there have been numerous occasions on, 5 p.m. on a Saturday when someone will come stumbling out of there trying to pet my dog, or, and as a woman, I don't really appreciate that. I don't feel comfortable with that. There are children in the neighborhood, so I don't think, we have never, at least people in our building have never said those Latinos. It's the patrons, the people that frequent Juanita's, and it is an issue for us as a building and as a neighborhood. The noise issue, the trash issue, and they are my neighbors, and we have tried really hard to get in touch with them, and it just hasn't worked out.
Trust me, I hear your concerns, and I would love to work on it so we can figure out where the problem is. I'm sure they don't want the situation to continue because they know that it's not in the best interest of their business if they continue not to obey about whatever.
Well, no offense, sir, but when we called, Abra has gone and talked with them. The police have talked to them on numerous occasions. And at some point, we have to wonder, all these agencies have gone in, right, to speak with them and tell them about our concerns, and they continue to do what they've been doing. So I don't,
They continually get fined, they continually get shut down. Monthly, there's problems there with the government. They're bad actors. We're trying our best, and a protest is the only option.
I just want to caution, because we had a similar incident with a business on 11th Street, that there was complaints about the patrons coming out at night, and you could hear them talking and laughing, and it was too loud. And there was a great protest and complaint, and they ultimately ran that business out. But in its place, they put Meridian Pint with all this outdoor seating, all of this noise, all of these people, and outdoor cafes from Meridian Pint all the way up to Monroe. I don't want to see a minority or small business run out of their location only to be gentrified and set up with outdoor seating where there's plenty of space for outdoor seating there. It's not fair to the community. I'm not going to vote against it. Right, I'm not voting against it. I'm just saying from my practical experiences and what has happened, if they do leave because of the constant complaints and after saying no more, what's going to replace it? Another restaurant or bar? Of course. So what I'm trying to go along with Commissioner Salmerian to try to find a way with the protest, because it will get their attention. I'm not against the protest, but to find a way to kind of work with them. I know that we were going to have TGIF over top of the store on Monroe and 14th. They were talking about soundproofing inside. There are things that businesses could do to mitigate that noise. So I think what we need to do is try to sit down and work with them and not, and that comment about drunken patrons. I live on 11th Street. It doesn't matter the race. All night long, Saturday, Friday, Thursday, now Wednesday, up and down the street, drunk as they would be. Loud, sometimes it's 2 or 3, sometimes it's 8 or 9. Oh. So this is you're on a commercial street in a busy, dense city. City noises go hand in hand, I understand. I had to invest in triple pane windows, so the buses weren't grabbing me to break every morning.
So I'm just saying, as neighbors, as a community, as a really diverse, energetic, inner city neighborhood, we got to try to find a way that we can all just get along.
And honestly, it is not our intention to, it never was to shut the restaurant or put them out of business. That's never, I mean, we understand that. And there are other bars within that block that don't seem to have similar issues, at least from what we've noticed. We just want to be able to work with them, and we just haven't had the opportunity yet. And at this point, we sort of feel like they don't care, because we've tried with other, through other agencies, and it just continues to happen. And honestly, I've left my card there so many times. I've tried to get in touch with all of us have in the building, with the owner, to speak with someone, so we can have some sort of communication.
Is the building owned by do they own that space, or do they lease that space? Because you may need to be actually dealing with who owns the space, as opposed to who leases the space. And that might be an avenue.
With that, I'll agree with Marshall. I think if it's a noise issue,
Right.
you go about the issues that would be a property owner.
Right.
I think if it's issues of trash, appropriate disposal, that's clearly there.
Right.
So,
And something
And I hope to get to that point with them over the next month or so, where we can discuss these sorts of things and finesse the goal.
well, I mean, personally, I think that if you're focusing on issues that you focus on their business, and I'm comfortable with whatever it takes us to get to that moment, we can consider around the table kind of conversation. But it does have to be very similar issues to the business, for the same reason that I think it's important that we have settlement agreements with every single business, because I think that's fair. I think treating all of our businesses on the same footing is fair, so that's where I lean. Are there comments from other commissioners? It seems like the conversation's mostly been over at this table.
You guys still have it?
Okay.
All the citizens can file their own complaint. They don't need to use us as a vehicle, and they can have their own protest. And that's what I advise y'all to do. So
Well-
there's two angles to ABRA. I've been involved in a number of them, and that's pretty much the only way it works, that you get your voices heard. And it sounds like you've made the commitment to try and help them make the right decisions, and they're not.
All right.
I move to accept the letter as written.
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Right?
Any abstentions? The motion passes 8 in favor, 1 against, and no abstentions. And now we get to the last item on our agenda, BZA application 19388 for a special exception to use the cellar as an office space at 1236 Columbia Road. Thank you for waiting it out.
Good evening, everybody. What, less people hear that? I wanted to tell you a bit about Open Home, and then you'll hear from Nick about the actual application for the zoning variance. We are a transitional housing program that has been present in Columbia Heights since 1970s, and we have a 90% efficacy rate of having families live in our units for 3 years and then going on to success and independence. We're there by right. We have a building at 1236 Columbia Road that has 2 apartments in it. There's a very large cellar space that's big enough to accommodate our offices. And we would like to move our offices from a rented townhouse into the cellar. Freddie Mac gave us money to do the renovations, and we we are not problematic. You may ask, well, if this is allowed, does that mean that when you sell the property, someone will use it for a law office? The fact of the matter is that there's a covenant that runs with our land, that even if we were to sell the property, it could only be sold to someone for the same use. So there's no chance that it would ever become anything else. The provision that we're under is community facility, but really all it means is that we're administering to people in 18 housing units. And our clients rarely come into our office. It's more, somebody said it was like a home room. Staff goes out to meet with people. They have to meet with their caseworker once a week. We have an education staff that meets with them. We get everybody working, so either they'll meet on a lunch break with folks or at their apartment. And there's rarely much activity other than we perform our administrative acts at the office. There are only 7 people working there, so we're just pretty minimal presence in the community. And we hope that I'm looking at, I didn't mean to not look at the commissioners, but we hope that you will accept our request, endorse it. We feel that we're an asset to Columbia Heights. We have a great success rate over the years with helping families actually become successful and independent. And we feel that programs like ours are the real solution to homelessness. We don't warehouse people or just put them up for the night in a shelter, but we're actually working with families and helping them find their strengths and educate their children. And in fact, even after they move out after 3 years, we have a scholarship fund and we continue to be connected to the children, and we help each child complete a post-secondary education. Most of them now are going to colleges, but some may go for vocational or certification training. But our end goal is for every child to end up at the end of the line with us, with an occupation, so that they can be self-sufficient and independent and break the cycle of poverty in their families. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nick Marachkowski with Storver & Associates. Commissioners, thanks for your time. As Lynn mentioned, our proposal here is to facilitate in an underutilized cellar space a very minimal, low-profile office use, a community service center, which is a special exception in the RF1 district, formerly known as the R4 district, which this sits in. So to make this possible, pretty much 2 things need to happen. One, we need to disconnect the ground floor, the first floor, which currently connects to it with an internal stair. And so if you look at the this sort of page, which I apologize, a little small for the audience members in the back, but this is the cellar level, this is the first floor. The internal stair would be converted to a bedroom on the first floor and an office on the cellar level. And so that would break the connection between the dwelling unit on the first and second floor, on the first floor. And then to facilitate access or accessibility, the grade difference at the front at Columbia Road needs to be transitioned. Currently you have to step up about 4 or 5 steps to sort of a midway landing and then down several steps to get back down to the cellar. For anybody who has mobility issues, for any number of reasons, that just is not tenable to get into that front door, that new front door for the office. So we're proposing a new ramp, which would be only 4 feet wide and connect to a small areaway, which the zoning administrator has said meets the test to not expose the building to be considered 4 stories. It remains a 3-story building. So that is our proposal, a minimal ramp in front, connected to an areaway and a front entrance, and then a conversion, small conversion of the existing cellar space to make it more usable for their office use.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wade,
Right. I reviewed this. I walked the property. In fact, application to convert the unutilized cellar level of an existing flat for use as a community service center.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to close the meeting? Never seems to have a problem with that one. All those in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Then at 9:17,